Thanks for stopping by. It's the beginning of December 2021, and I thought that I would take everyone who's watching on a tour of my home office / my studio. But before we do that, I think that we might need to change the lighting. So, somewhat better, more illumination in an otherwise dark room which was only being illuminated by the grey December weather. As some of you may know, I started teaching mostly exclusively from home beginning in March 2020. You may have done the same thing too. In fact, if you're watching this, you probably have been engaged in some kind of teaching from home and maybe even conducting research and other activities from home. However, as opposed to most of my colleagues and most people, I understand what they started doing during the pandemic in other universities around the world, I took a somewhat different trajectory. I didn't always do exactly those kinds of things that some of my colleagues were doing. And I would like to suggest that my colleagues were Zoom-centric in their activities, and they were also desk-bound. They also seem to, and sometimes management in the university seemed to think that this was a temporary measure. I, on the other hand, viewing there being a temporary need for change, I also thought, what would happen if we were thinking more long-term and if we were actually reflecting upon what we were doing, a sort of critical, pedagogical, and technical reflection on what we are all doing or not doing. I felt dissatisfied with Zoom. I noted that students frequently did not have their cameras on. And the same could be said in some cases for faculty meetings and so forth. There was no way to get that kind of contact, and at some point I thought, well, if I don't know what the students are doing, and that's perhaps okay, hardly any are actually giving me any kind of feedback, then I could just look at a camera and deliver my lecture. It wouldn't make much of a difference. I wasn't getting any feedback. So slowly, during the start of the pandemic, besides having regular Zoom lectures, I started to pre-record some lectures and then hold question and answer sessions on Zoom afterwards. And the response from some students in some classes was fantastic. They loved it. I was an engaging teacher as opposed to somebody just sitting at a desk using Zoom. Unfortunately, some of these comments never found their way into student evaluations of the course. These were things that students were telling me during the courses that I was involved in. And there was no check the box for that kind of thing in the standard kind of student evaluation materials that are. So I began, particularly during the summer of 2020, beginning to invest intellectually and invest financially in terms of equipment that I largely was buying out of my own pocket, some of which you will be seeing in the studio tour, which will be coming up shortly. So as I became slowly a self-taught videographer, building upon some photography skills that I had and some equipment that I had, not only was I attempting to establish a home office in a spare room at my home, but I was also in the process of beginning to make what could be called a recording studio for university lectures. Something that would take some time. What we can see right now behind me is a white-colored wall. In the beginning, the wall was more beige with butterflies on it. Hello everyone, and welcome to this course, MV 103E, Transdisciplinary Environmental Management. My name is Joe Strahl, and I will be in charge of this course. by having a more neutral background, and in the future maybe I can light the background and so forth, then that would mean that I could more decide what I am projecting to the students, instead of just being a tiny, tiny, tiny little box on Zoom when the students were seeing that. And of course, there are options on Zoom to make changes to make the person bigger or smaller who's speaking, but I have no idea what the students are doing in terms of their settings. I don't want to be dependent upon the whims of Zoom. I want to be able to try to do everything myself and make sure that the students see exactly what I'm trying to get them to see. The equipment that I had in the beginning, like so many people, it was just a simple laptop microphone and camera, incredibly inferior video and audio quality, and that was something that needed to be changed. The other thing which bothered me a lot was the lack of kinesthetics. There was no body language. I, and like so many other people, were just a talking head. And if we want to be engaging, and if we want to try to mimic what we did in the classroom, the students should be able to see our upper torso. The students should also be able, to see our upper torso. And also, it's not good for us in our working environment to be seated 8 hours at a time. We could be seated and we could be standing, and we could be moving around in the room where we are holding our lecture, just as if we were in the university. And by using body language, and by having better quality video and better quality sound, we can be engaging, and we have therefore in some ways won half the battle. The other half is, of course, the pedagogical challenges of teaching without having the students in the same room, and perhaps not even having the students carrying out their activity at the same time as I was recording my lecture or giving them an assignment to do that was pre-recorded. So I was after better audio, better video, and the ability to use body language, or what we could just call kinesthetics. Because you need to have a combination of all three to have successful teaching. And the odd thing is that there were thousands or hundreds of thousands of university instructors around the world who uncritically sat down at their desk and used meeting software to teach. And by removing the kinesthetics, it was as if you removed the ability to do certain things. You are left with poor video, poor audio, and no body language, or almost no body language. No wonder students sometimes found some lectures and other activities to be incredibly unengaging. So, time for me to have us take a look at the studio. So what I have here is I have a sort of like a bar top table, which is at a better height compared to just a desk or a regular table. I can place objects at the right height. If I have the camera here on the table recording myself, I can have notes right in front of me. This is essentially the same height that many university lecterns would be. I have here, which is hard to see, but I can turn it. I have an LED panel, so that when there's no daylighting, or if there's too much light and I need to control the light, I can record lectures even at night or in the evening if necessary. You can see off to the side here, I have an additional light, and there's the diffused soft light, the general light for the entire room. This all means that I can, with these three light sources, I can control the light that is shining on me, and I can make a better kind of presentation. As you saw before, I can have text appear in post-processing, but I can also do this. I can move the screen that I otherwise have on the desk, and I can have a PowerPoint presentation there, And as we'll see as from parts of some pre-recorded lectures, I can move around in the room. I have a limited mobility. I can gesture. I can point to the various points, almost as if I was in a lecture room in the university on campus. Of course, the screen would be much larger compared to me, so it's not quite the same. And I don't have a projector on the wall like one would have and so forth. I haven't invested, and no one has invested in that. But as we can see, get a sense of the size of this room using my fisheye lens here to have another kind of perspective. I have the possibility of holding lectures pre-recorded almost as if I was in the classroom. This is from a period of time when there was a train station and rail line going in the direction of Göteborg and Stockholm. And climate change, we see these all the time. We could do a natural science, ecological, biological study where we were mapping the existence of certain species in particular locations. So moving away from where I might be standing and lecturing and moving towards where I would be desked. What can we see there? Yeah, what can we see? Besides some junk, because it's still in the making of the process here. We have a laptop. We have on a tripod a particular camera which is mounted, where I can use this particular camera, a Q2 and 4K, as opposed to the laptop. This particular webcam, if you'd like, although that's not its primary purpose, this is primarily used by musicians. It has a very fantastic microphone, so it can pick up sounds much further away in the room and pick them up well. And it also has a camera, and a camera which is better than almost any other webcam that might be available. It's really a surprise that universities haven't started to buy this kind of thing for their staff to use. But then, of course, they'd have to know about that as well. Why is this mounted so high? I also have, you'll see in a moment, I also have an additional laptop. I also have here an additional source of illumination, so that if it's very dark I can light up on the one side. And I have, which you've seen already before on this table over here, still an additional source of illumination. And I can adjust these sources of illumination to get a better picture when I'm looking this way at the camera. So it's going to be difficult to show this exactly how it would be because I'm not connected to people on Zoom. But here we can see me available. I'm looking right at the camera. You're in the back. I have an additional computer. We can see what that computer is. It's in the midst of post-processing a lecture. But let's suppose I was going to go to Zoom. Go to the same Zoom. So what do we see here now? We see that I have my PowerPoint presentation, which I can see there. There am I. That's me logged in there. If there were other students who were logged in, besides Joe student there, let's say there are 25 students or 40 students, this screen over here would be filled with all the students, just their little pictures, where I would have my PowerPoint presentation there. I can look at my presentation, I can look at the camera, and by looking at the camera in the direction of where all the students are, the students will think that I'm actually looking at them, as opposed to staring down here all the time. There is, of course, a problem. There might be some students there that I'm not able to see, but I can always move to the side, and I can always move to the side. And through this, the students will feel that maybe I'm a bit more, this word I like to use, engaged. I have an additional camera. This is where I keep most of my audio equipment. Right now my wireless microphone is charging. Here I have a variety of different lenses, most of which I don't need to produce content for Malmö University, but sometimes I have perhaps a reason for that. And here I have my batteries, memory cards. Down here I have a HDMI capture card, which I won't be technical and explain about. And I also have a way to run the camera directly off of the mains, out an outlet from the wall, as opposed to running it just on batteries. I can mount this on the top of my camera, so I have a much larger screen, more like the size of a cell phone, to be able to. And then what you see on the upper left, that's the laser printer, which really shouldn't be in the room that I'm in, but I put it as far away from possible from my desk, and for some reason it occasionally will make sounds like it cleans something, sometimes right in the middle of a lecture. But if it's a pre-recorded lecture, I can always make a jump cut. In other words, I can stop the recording and I can reposition the camera and continue talking. And if I don't want it to be as abrupt, I can always use in post-processing a way to fade in one part for another. I find that when I'm recording a lecture and there are natural pauses, that besides just pushing the button and stopping it, sometimes what I do is I walk off and then stop the recording, and then I walk back on and I've started the recording and walk back on. It would be like if you were in a classroom and you were talking and you reached a particular point that was a pause, you might be advancing the PowerPoint and you might be standing for a moment not saying anything while the students are taking in the PowerPoint presentation. As you can see here, it's possible to recreate the classroom in very much, it's possible to recreate the classroom using pre-recorded lectures, with the only difference is that you can't have a direct interaction with the students. You have to wait until afterwards, after they have seen several 45-minute lectures, to be able to then, in a question and answer session, get the questions and answer them then. My experience is that sometimes students have very few questions in the question and answer sessions. Sometimes I have never received so many questions as in some of those question and answer sessions. And why is that? That's because the students who are interested can re-watch the pre-recorded lectures ahead of time before the session and think and reflect and come with their questions. Much more difficult when you've left the classroom and you realize that you had a question. Now you can go back and watch it, and you could even watch it at another time, at the end of the course, or maybe you could watch a lecture again from a previous course and see it again. Wow, what kind of resource pre-recorded lectures could be. Of course, it doesn't work for all teaching, and some subjects in some programs it might not work at all, but it should definitely be considered as a complement to just sitting in our desks and being talking heads.